Hello, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. And hello, Kayla, how are you?
Good, thank you.
So nice to have you. And thank you guys for joining us for how to launch your virtual mindfulness and mental health training in 3 days with our expert today, Kayla Kozan, the founder and CEO of Peak Wellness. So we're just going to jump on in and get started pretty quick. We've got a lot to cover. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. They are a group of HR, IT, and multi-channel marketing experts. Highly recommend them, especially if you have some online marketing needs, which a lot of folks are increasing their online spend these days and finding that that can be very effective as they're figuring out how to pivot business during a pandemic. I also want to say thank you to Insperity, HR that makes a difference. Insperity, I reached out to them, asked them to sponsor our summit. They never hesitated. Sure, what do you need? How can we help? And then I said, well, you could put together something as a freebie, something that will help our HR folks reevaluate and rally, be resilient during this time of crisis. And they came back with, well, how about a free HR financial analysis report and confidential debrief? And I asked a little bit, asked a few questions about what that was. And what we found out was that is going to take our business performance advisor partner over there at Insperity anywhere between 3 and 10 hours to support you in gaining insight related to the real cost burden of being an employer. And because this is 2020 and we're in the middle of a complete game changer for all of us, we know that whatever HR budget you had in mind has now been crumpled up and thrown out and you're having to start over. This is the perfect timing to get a little bit of advice. They know that not everyone that takes advantage of this offer is going to be a good fit for them. And I asked them about that. They said, don't you worry, we're here to support. Let people know they can reach out to us. So check that out at turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. And our final sponsor that I want to mention, we have reached out to our strategic planning experts here at TurnKey, and they've put together a data-driven crisis management, crisis strategy, and post-crisis strategic planning process that looks at how we can assess, create an action plan, and align your team around what do we do now. If you know that, okay, we've got to pivot, we've got to reevaluate everything, and we've got to get our team on the same page quickly, and you'd like some support with that, our team of experts is in the wings, ready to go. They've also put it together in a name your own price. So it's incredibly affordable because it's about what budget works for you. They really are here to serve. So give me a call. I'd love to hear more about what you guys are up to. My name is Anissa Avon, and I am the CEO of TurnKey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are a global enterprise learning and development organization that specializes in all things learning and development and strategic change initiatives. What I'm most proud of right now is our Leading in a Crisis Summit. Will be every Wednesday and Thursday in April and May. And now we've had some calls to go into June. We'll see. It's all about actionable business and HR strategies for navigating crisis and change. This afternoon, we've got Dr. Mark Freeman coming back on to talk about motivation. Tomorrow, I'll be I'll have a full hour in the morning to talk about leading change through the pivot, through reevaluating your model, and through how to reopen the business. So if we may come back often to the site, we're adding speakers all the time. Let us know what you think. Give us some feedback and tell us what other topics you'd like to see. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Kayla Kozan. Kayla is the founder and CEO of Peak Wellness. She has over 300 hours of formal training from the University of Toronto, Google's SIY Leadership Institute, and Mindfulness Without Borders, which she said was just a phenomenal, most incredible training she's ever been to. She left her day job to make mindfulness meditation more accessible for the working professional. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Kayla, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about you and Peak Wellness and how'd you get into this?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great question, Anissa. Sometimes I ask myself the same thing. How did I get into this? But this was just mindfulness in general, mindfulness meditation, a couple of different practices were just so beneficial to me in managing my own mental health. I was a skeptic just as much as probably a couple of people in the room at first, but just had the opportunity to really try it out as a matter of helping to manage moods, worries, anxieties, and eventually just helping me to get back to work. And so once I was able to come back to work, I noticed, mental illness or not, so many people were just operating at a stress level this high. And so I was able to teach some really simple techniques to some friends and even coworkers, and it just seemed to be really beneficial for them. So that showed me that, as long as there's stressed out people, there is a market here, and we can always try and reach more offices.
So this is, and you'll probably share more about this, so don't let me take us off the rails here, but this is coming from a personal experience for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found myself off work about 5 years ago, just going through mental health issues for the first time. And so after, it took me about a year to get back to work. And
Wow.
obviously, mindfulness didn't get me the whole way. It was a supplementary type of therapy or a technique. But yeah, this comes from my own experience. That's how I know it is, it worked for me. And so that gives me a little more conviction, I think,
Wow.
in helping share with others.
Thank you. So what are we going to learn today?
Yeah, so I would love to keep this topic. I know it can get a little long, it can get a little dry. So I would love to keep it super high level, but also give you guys some advice on just exactly how you actually deploy a program like this and how quickly you can do it. Of course, I've given tons of presentations like this that just didn't have that 3-day qualifier on it. That's kind of a new addition, just given the circumstances. And so, just answer some questions really straight away. Things like, how much should this cost you? Where do you even find a facilitator? How do you implement a program like this? And so hopefully give you guys some answers to walk away with, and even just an action plan to get started.
That's perfect. And we already talked about some of the questions I'm going to ask. Like, what? Mindfulness in the middle of a crisis? We got to work about revenue. So we'll get into that in perfect timing. You tell me when.
Yeah. Awesome. Would you like me to get started then? We can kind
Please,
of
yes.
guide through. All right. So thank you guys again. I will give you just a super high level overview. That was a very generous introduction there, Anissa. Just like you said, my background was in finance for a little bit, and then I moved into the startup world, and then later into HR tech. I also, on the side now, just given my own experience, I talk a lot about my own experiences with mental health in the office, and then of course mindfulness in the office as well. So as I was working in these different jobs, I found them stressful in a couple of different ways, and just on the back burner as kind of like a hobby, we talked about this, I was doing a little bit of stand-up comedy. And I know people might be thinking like, Kayla, you don't seem funny at all. That's why I don't do it anymore. So now I stick to what I know. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to speak about my own experience. It is actually, we just kicked off Mental Health Month. May is Mental Health Month. So I do like to joke, if you have a mental illness, this is like the Olympics for us. So we're really busy. A lot of organizations are looking to bring in some sort of support for their team members. And so it is just the perfect timing.
Great.
At a really high level, what we set out to do was just to make more mindful offices. And that was our company mission until about, I would say, 2 months ago, in that we just extended that to mean home offices as well. And so if that means meeting people where they are on Zoom, that is what we're ready to do. We've had the privilege of working with some very large organizations. Again, anyone who is investing in the mental health of their team, from a team that is 10 people to 10,000 or more. So the goal of this talk is actually to take some work off your plate. I think, Anissa, you alluded to an issue that we're kind of facing in the industry overall, is adding on these new programs at a time when people feel like they need to take things off. So hopefully the goal of this talk is to skip out on some of the add-ons, the extra stuff, the jargon, and just get to kind of the meat and bones of what you would need to launch your own program.
Yeah, that's very helpful. It's interesting. Even just an empty plate there brings relief. Just the visual of an empty, oh wait, what is that? I don't even, that's a flying saucer, right? But to go into that one little piece, are you finding that organizations are benefiting from a mindfulness program right now? I mean, we know all of us are stressed. We know employees are stressed. We know that organizations are having to furlough and lay off, and they don't know, even as we open for business, if we're going to be able to bring people back on, or if our employees on employment are going to even come back on, right? So what makes this the right time for this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has really actually been on a to-do list for a while. For an HR leader, mindfulness meditation, virtual yoga classes, things like that have been really just amping up over the last, I would say, 6 to 12 months. So I think it made its way onto the to-do list for a lot of organizations, but this has really ramped it up to being at the top. And I think just recognizing that with our teams kind of more stressed and scattered and working from home, some typical strategies that you might put in place are very difficult to deploy right now. So I think that's helped people to kind of take a look. What is cost effective? What is something that we can get started right away? And I think that's really kind of leveled mindfulness back up to the top. We know that there are opportunities for people to either work through the curriculum on their own with a recorded version, or organizations are also finding, I think, putting together these almost mindfulness clubs, or a part of the organization that tunes in for these videos has helped to build some interconnectivity even within the office, even when working from home.
Very helpful. Thank you.
All right. So I do want to address something. I start every presentation with this. And I always like to say that mindfulness meditation has an image problem. And the reason I know that's true is any organization that we work with, if you can even just from your seat right now, just imagine closing your eyes for a second and just finding that first image that pops into your head. What does it look like when someone's meditating? You know, where are they? Who is it? What time of day is it? And in a live session, we ask people to just start yelling things out. And we almost always get to a girl that looks something like this. So it's a young woman. She's on a mountain. It's sunrise. Sometimes people say it's like the afternoon or sunset. But we're usually always getting to something that looks a little bit like this. Yes. I know we have some men in the room as well, so we don't want to just not include them. Perhaps this is more what you pictured for yourself. But the problem with this, although these people are undoubtedly meditating, I think it really paints a very narrow view of who can, who should, and who and where you can actually meditate. So it really just paints, I think, a very narrow picture. So something that we work with organizations right away is just saying, you don't need to have this mountain or this outfit. We're actually going to be working on mindfulness in day-to-day terms. So what would that look like for someone? It's important to kind of distinguish as well, I think, between mindfulness and meditation. So you'll hear them used interchangeably. You'll hear them used back to back. An easy way to think of it is just those pictures we looked at. Those people are probably in a formal meditation practice. So they're going through some sort of guided training. Even if you use any of the meditation apps, that's usually kind of what we would consider meditation specifically. mindfulness is a much larger overarching concept. It has links to academia, also clinical meanings. And so that's something that you can think is kind of this wide umbrella. And while meditation is one way to practice mindfulness, it's not the only way. And so we always like to give some examples. I think a lot of the time people already have these mindful activities. They maybe just don't have the terminology for it, or they didn't think of it that way. So some places where you can actually be mindful, gardening is inherently a very mindful activity, spending time outdoors in general, working with your hands. This used to be a picture of a gym, but now it is a home gym for most people, or even just going for a walk or jog. Very mindful. It helps people to get out of autopilot a lot of the time. Any hobbies that people have, whether that is painting, crochet, even something like a home reno, again, taking your mind off of perhaps work and some of the day-to-day stressors, spending time with family or loved ones, kids, spending time with your other kids or pets or animals. And then most importantly, and what we talk about the most with organizations is kind of in these times of frustration, stress, and if you have some looming deadlines, things like that, that is always impacting an organization. We know now that it's even just ramped up to the next level. So this is a little bit of a text wall here. I will just give you some of the highlights. This is just a really small sliver of the information that's coming out around mindfulness and meditation. So just benefits to your organization overall. Reducing stress, reducing irritability is a big one. You're also working towards increasing concentration, focus, motivation, even just impacting people's optimism or their attachment to their job. It can help give people a higher interest in their own job or their career, improving problem-solving abilities. Even creative teams will use meditation as kind of a kickstart for brainstorming. And something that I do find interesting, especially for leaders, is the Harvard Business Review did a study, and they found that meditation can have a longer lasting effect on reducing stress than a vacation. And so while in the short term, the vacation is probably a little sunnier and more enjoyable, they find that after about 10 months, the positive impact of the vacation has basically just worn away, where your mindfulness practice is still paying dividends there. These are some just benefits, I think, in terms of if we're looking not just in corporate wellness, but into mindfulness and meditation specifically for support for mental health. So we know that especially now employees need more mental health support than ever. We're also seeing that employees are more comfortable asking for mental health support. Deloitte found that companies with mental health programs in place had an annual ROI of $1.62 for every dollar spent. So you know, this is even after just a very short time. They found after 3 years, you're going upwards of $2 in return. And so it's kind of the idea of, you know, if you could go to the bank and give them $1 and they give you $1.62 back, you would just keep doing that forever. It really seems to be, I think this is really going to show over the next few years just the impact of mental health support in general. And then finally, mindfulness meditation, you may have just noticed this anecdotally, but is actually the fastest growing wellness trend in North America. It's outpaced yoga, which we saw about 5 years ago. And in terms of different strategies, it's a very accessible method for supporting your employees.
So on this Deloitte one, is that specifically for every $1 spent on mindfulness training? Is that what that study is? Or in similar or affinity type initiatives?
Yeah, sorry, I should have specified. It is in the area specifically of corporate wellness,
Okay.
and then things that are connected to mental health. And so they have their own kind of definition for this. This may include other things such as programs like resiliency training, or there's some other kind of very topical ones right now. Even something interestingly that might fall into that category could be something like financial coaching. So we know a lot of, so that is a
nutrition, financial, exercise, mindfulness, meditation.
You got it. And you're
Okay.
actually, I think, also really hitting on a very important point, which is different people will find different programs more beneficial for them. So as an organization, especially a large organization, by kind of offering this wide array of services, that helps people to actually find the one that's most effective for them, whether that is resiliency training or that is just attending some of the personal finance classes.
It's a really big deal to be able to quantify it. You know, for those of us who are responsible for putting forth an initiative that historically would be considered esoteric or fluffy,
Mm-hmm.
whatever term, you know, as you said, there's an image related to meditation and mindfulness. Being able to say this, we now have years, if not decades, of research to back this up. And it's easy to find the Deloitte studies. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're coming in, as you can imagine, for Deloitte, they're coming in with very objective measures. So things that they're looking at are reductions in short-term disability, long-term disability, when available, if that can be tied to mental health or stress leave. So they are really coming in. The report itself is phenomenal. And you see the whole breakdown of how you're absolutely right. Until we can quantify this, it's going to be a really tough sell. And so I think they have just done the corporate wellness space such a favor in, coming out with this research and showing, we can put a number on this now.
That's fantastic. You know, when I was preparing for our talk, I wanted to find out what companies are actually putting forth mindfulness initiatives. And I discovered Google, which is very progressive in a lot of ways. So that's not surprising. But also Aetna, Mayo Clinic, and the United States Marine Corps have mindfulness training. So that's a lot of differences between Google and the U.S. Marine Corps.
Absolutely. And I think if you really wanted to peg an opposite there, SAP has one of the largest internal mindfulness programs out there. And
Is that right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We think of the Googles and the tech startups, but this has absolutely made its way into enterprise as well.
Very good.
All right, so I'm going to take you guys through a speed round now with the purpose of just kind of getting to the point of, if you're going to start this program soon, what type of program should you start? What does it look like? You can maybe do a little bit of guessing as you see each one here. And the reason that you should take my word for it at all, which you may be asking yourself, is we have taught over 150 classes and courses over the last about 2 years. And so if we're saying that over 60 minutes is too long for a class, it's probably because we've done a class for over 62 minutes and it's just a little bit much. And so, I think it's worth noting that we have done a lot of experimentation in this space. We've also fallen on our face a little bit, but that has given us some insight on, what we could actually be deploying right away. So classic question right off the bat is, should you do it live or pre-recorded? There are benefits to pre-recorded in one specific scenario, but I'm going to say for most cases, you're going to want to do it live. Just like we are doing here today, you are committing to a program that's a little more interactive. It also allows the facilitator to focus specifically on your industry or your business. Pre-recorded does work well in the areas of things like executive leadership coaching, or when you're actually just working with individuals. So in that case, you would be likely buying something more of like a license per head. We've seen this in a lot of continuing education models, but if you're looking just to deploy something for your whole organization, you're going to want to go with live. The facilitator should be able to customize the content a little bit based on your industry and your needs. How often should you have the class? Weekly. So daily, especially for your first swing at it, is just a little ambitious. It takes a lot of time out of people's days, and it kind of can hinder just the day-to-day attendance rates. Weekly is by and far the best. It allows us to kind of build this habit. So, every Tuesday we meditate at whatever it is, 11 a.m., where biweekly can get a little confusing for people, is it meditation this week or next week? So weekly really helps to build that habit. Monthly and quarterly, there's different types of strategies we could use for that space. Probably not just like a 30-minute meditation class, more like a workshop or some sort of wellness day. But in terms of your first type of program, that's going to be just, in this case, mindfulness meditation classes, you're going to want to go weekly. How long should the classes be? 30 minutes is your optimal time here. 15 minutes works for some organizations, but usually when people are booking 15 minutes out of their calendar, they're booking 30 minutes anyway. So it allows a little more content that's a little deeper as well. 60 plus, it just gets long. It's a lot for people to take out of their calendar, especially right now. So we would definitely suggest that 30 minutes. Should this be mandatory? So should this program be mandatory or even heavily encouraged? This might surprise you. I'm going to say no. And the reason is, with these types of programs, encouraging people obviously helps, but a good mindfulness program is actually going to grow organically. So you want to have the people who are most interested attend for the first week and the second week, and they will become your biggest supporters. And so instead of kind of trying to jam people into this, I would say don't make it mandatory, just make it available. You can encourage people a little bit, but you're really going to find the best organic growth and I think love and enjoyment for your program if you let it grow just over time as people are sharing with their peers.
I can only imagine an edict from the top. You will be mindful. You will go to our meditation training.
Exactly.
Can you imagine how great that mindfulness training will be if we're all sitting there going, he made me, so I'm not even going to listen. Just not, yeah, that makes sense.
You're absolutely right, Anissa. And I was at a conference where someone at Google shared this as well. So they've been running their mindfulness program for over 10 years now. And so the specific group they were talking about was for some of their software engineers. So very high levels of very intellectual people who are also just kind of more the type of person, to generalize, who's looking for some hard data on this. And so they've tried both. So in creating a mandatory program, I was listening to the speaker said that they were the person who was developing and they were the person teaching this mandatory program. And he said, it is so discouraging to be teaching a class when you have people sitting like this, the whole front row, who just clearly do not want to be there. And so it is not the right thing that you would ever want to force anyone to do. But what he said is, once they moved it to a mandatory program, those same software engineers that were just so
a non-mandatory program, when they moved it to not mandatory.
Oh, sorry. Yes. When they moved it to not mandatory, he said these same engineers started coming on their own time, and they would be the ones who would come to him after class with an Excel spreadsheet and show him, I've meditated for 4 minutes this day and this is how it improved. And here's the graph and here's the chart. And so, I think it's a great example. You will find your audience for this and it will grow with the success of your program. But forcing people just doesn't work for this type of activity.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a couple other things here. So what should you look for in a facilitator? It is a little bit of the wild, wild west when it comes to formal training for facilitators. So the programs that I have gone through, those would be the top 4, I would say, of some of the wide array of classes and training I have taken. But what I would say, this is a little bit of a trick question. You're going to want to try and find someone who has all of these. So studio experience means teaching in a meditation studio or a yoga studio. The reason for that is that's where the most trainers are actually going to come from, is some sort of studio background. However, you also want to make sure they have corporate experience. Being able to speak the language is one of the most important parts of this program. Being able to be empathetic and also understand that we're not in a studio, the language is different. Formal training is very important. It's going to help the facilitator to actually become a teacher, to be able to facilitate interesting courses, keep the attention. And then for this specifically, especially as everything is virtual right now, just trying to find someone who's tech savvy. They are comfortable on the camera, because that's going to be a real differentiator in the end.
Well, and you mentioned the corporate experience piece. And if I were hiring, that would be important, because I wouldn't want to bring someone in that's going to talk about other philosophies that are outside the scope of, frankly, what's appropriate in our environment. And I don't have opinions or judgments in a person's private choices around religion or spirituality or all of that. But in a work environment, there's some lines. How do you ensure that mindfulness doesn't, transition into Sufism or, things that might be perceived, even if they're not, or Buddhism or whatever, as religious? How do you keep that line firm?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously foundational for all of our facilitators. And I think having that corporate experience, you don't even need to have worked at like a mega company for 20 years, but just understanding that the language is different. There's also, your company could have policies against this type of thing. It's not, just a light preference. And so we call it a part of like the peak technique, but that is heavily, that's one of the most important things. And I do think that's actually something that can scare organizations away from bringing someone in, the fear that, there's going to be crystals and candles and this is just, it gets out of control, right? And so, of course, you want to look for a facilitator. Preferably, they're not even just an independent facilitator. They're working with an organization who specializes in corporate.
Okay. So in the distinction then is, there's a corporate mindfulness policy methodology that doesn't look like, crystals and, chimes and other things that frankly are more on the fringe.
You got it. And this is just a greater emphasis on the neuroscience, the data, as if it's helpful when someone's worked in a corporation because they've experienced, handing off a report that holds water. And so that's the type of experience that we want to bring in for the facilitators. Focus on the stats, focus on the science, and create that actual buy-in at a corporate level.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, well, I think I only have a couple more things here. This is a question that comes up a lot and often goes unanswered, I think. Of course, in this space, it can be, no one really wants to show their hand necessarily, and it can be difficult to find actual data on this. So I did want to provide, in my experience, so each class, the one variable you're going to deal with here is the number of attendees. So depending on what that looks like, some organizations could have up to 600, 700, 800 attendees. You're probably going to pay a premium for that. Either the facilitator needs to have better infrastructure so they can even support a team that large. But if you're looking for kind of your typical 500 to 1,000 person company, you can expect usually an uptake rate of about 10 to 15%. So say you're kind of looking around this 100 attendees. It's going to depend on the number of classes you purchase at a time. Sometimes classes are sold per month or by groups of 5, 10, 15, something like that. But I think you can expect for a corporate meditation class to cost you around that $275. You may find it's more, potentially you could get closer to that $100 or $200 if you're just working one-off with kind of a facilitator that was like your hairdresser's friend's daughter, something like that. But when you get into that, the corporate and the enterprise ready facilitators, you're looking closer to that $375.
Well, and if you do the math, we're talking 37 cents or whatever it is a person if you've got 100 attendees. So
you got it.
Pretty good ROI there.
You got it. And it is something that can scale with your team. It grows with your team. And yes, exactly. In comparison to something that looks like where you would be paying per head, this is it's a great option. I think that's why we're seeing people putting these into place so quickly, just from being cost effective as well.
Well, the math was way off, but I think the point was made that, at $4 a pop, you're really, and then the earlier Deloitte figure, $1.62, after a year for every dollar spent. I mean, those are good numbers. And it's an inexpensive way to demonstrate, especially right now, to demonstrate we do care about your mental health, and we're going to implement a program that is optional, but will support you. And that can change the nature, the culture, as well as address organizational wellness needs that are urgent right now.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I might hire you. That sounded great.
Perfect.
Yeah, there's another stat out there as well that we float around, and it's in US dollars. So I think this is coming from looking at one individual. So per employee, I think they say $808 is the annual lost revenue due to stress-related absences.
Per employee.
Per head, yeah.
Wow.
So obviously that's an average. So you're having people who are off work for months and months that are driving that up. But if you consider that cost, how easily that could be offset by some of these programs.
Very nice.
All right. So I do want to make sure I get to the end of this here. I'm going to fly through this. This means, it's difficult to say there's a perfect meditation class for any organization out there, but this would be heavily my recommendation. So a live weekly 30-minute class hosted by a facilitator, formal training, corporate and studio experience. The internal messaging should be simple, inviting. The class is not mandatory, features a healthy dose of neuroscience, humor, and simple secular language.
Perfect.
That's the summary there. Other things that a good vendor should be able to provide you with, they speak the corporate language. Like I said, no crystals, no candles. Secular content, meaning it is not tied to any specific religion or spirituality. They should supply you with some internal marketing messaging so that you can launch this program faster. So something you would send out either to leadership or to your team that is actually going to be taking the training. Supplementary resources, worksheets, we're often kind of just at the tip of the iceberg when we do a session like this. So there's a lot more we can provide in terms of actual resources. Recording of each session. Anyone who's doing a virtual class for you should be able to provide the recording, I think. Some facilitators might tell you that that is kind of their private information or that's their IP. But what I would say, I mean, it's never made sense to us with the mission of reaching as many people as possible to, withhold that recording. So we provide the recording for everyone. And then of course they can scale with your team as your program and hopefully your organization grows. So that's all I've got for you here. In terms of those email templates, I have linked to this. So this is just a QR code. You don't need a special app or anything. You can just hold your camera up to it. It's going to take you right to the page where we have these email templates. I think we can make sure that these resources are available for your audience as well.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about those bonus templates. What can someone use those for?
Yeah, so I would provide that template to whoever is going to be kind of handling this program. And so often what we'll find is it's comes from leadership. Leadership would like to see a program like this implemented, and they're able to put one person in charge of it. This is something that is really, really important right now. In the past, perhaps we would have had a whole wellness committee or a steering committee or put together this whole task force for this. What I would say is that's absolutely not necessary, especially right now. You put one person in charge of this, you give them the resources they need. Those email templates are going to include an email that you would send upwards. So let's say you were sending it, pitching the idea to leadership, here's some of the ROI, here's some of the stats that have come out. And it's also going to provide the emails that you would send, I guess, downwards or to your team who would actually take the facilitation. So just including, they're quite simple emails, but if you have to write them yourself, it's just a lot of work. And you don't exactly know what you're necessarily promoting until the program gets started. So we highlight just the benefits of meditation. Anyone can take this. You don't need special equipment, things like that, that you just pop into an email. Like I said, you get this out the door in a couple days, and that's going to help you, I think, hit the ground running.
Lovely, lovely, excellent. And tell us about the ebook and the freebie that you've put together for our audience.
Yeah, so that link is going to take you to the same place as the free ebook QR code will. Like I said, you just pull up your iPad, your laptop, your phone right now, and that'll take you right there. And that ebook is 5 simple steps to launching your first program. So this isn't really COVID specific. I think you'll find the kind of speed round here is a little more COVID specific, but it's just going to, again, supply you with some of those email templates, also just some of the wording around launching your first program. And so that is available for you guys. And then the other one there is just a link to our services, testimonials, companies we've been able to work with.
Lovely, lovely. And so if someone were to reach out to you, what might they reach out to you for, and how does an organization use your services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say about 70% of the services we have right now, or the clients that we have, I'm able to facilitate for personally myself. So that has really quickly filled up. So I have a number of clients that I'm facilitating for, but of course, as an organization, our focus was always on site and becoming nationwide. And so we actually have facilitators in 4 pretty significantly different time zones. So depending on where that person is coming from, we would just get a better understanding perhaps of their needs, hop on a quick 15-minute phone call. Things such as, when do you want to start this program? What industry are you in? Do you have any specific concerns? That could be something like, we just had to lay off 30% of our employees, so the worry and anxiety is high. We just hop on a phone call to understand how we can support that team the best. And then depending on their timing, we would find the facilitators that's the best match for them.
Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Bettina said that she scanned the barcode and it didn't, or the QR code, and it didn't pull up anything.
Uh-oh.
But she can email you to get those links separately. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that that bit.ly link there will get you into the right spot. Maybe I could even drop it in the chat as well.
Perfect.
But yes, I'm always just an email away, and yeah, whatever resources we can support you with, you'll also be able to find that same information just on our website.
Perfect. I want to share with people, do reach out to Kayla if she can be supportive in your goals. The programs that she's put together are clearly needed right now. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, Kayla. Also want to mention that our other sponsors with TurnKey have put together some buy one, get one virtual training, including everything from crisis management and EQ to neuro leadership and employee motivation to business continuity, getting back to work, etc. If TurnKey or Kayla can be of service to you, it would be our privilege and honor. Do join us, come back to our Leading in a Crisis Summit, and check out our other talks, and tell us also who you'd like to see on one of these talks and how we can support you. Kayla, great. I really appreciated the way you presented this. You didn't try to pitch us your stuff. You just want to be of service, and you shared with us some real facts that anyone can go and implement a program. And if they want a professional, I hope that they'll call you.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for having me. Like I said, I think you guys are really making a difference out there for leaders. And, I'm tuning into a lot of the talks myself. It's just so helpful. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. You know what? Do you have one more second? We do have a quick question.
Sure.
This just came in this time when organizations are having to cut back on their operating budgets and perhaps needing to implement furloughs or layoffs, so many of us. How could you propose the value of a program like this to senior leadership? I have a feeling they may laugh in my face if I brought this up now. I think that's a fair question, isn't it?
It is absolutely a fair question. I would say even as recently as a year ago, I think a lot of organizations were feeling this way. We've seen with the recent circumstances that organizations are actually deploying these virtual programs. If there is one positive that has come out of this, is they've been able to really start deploying these programs quickly and to support their employees in other ways. So what I would suggest, if you're facing someone laughing in your face, I think it should be commended that you're bringing something that can help other people to the top, even if it's something that's not as traditional. I would suggest even perhaps in that case, you could Of course, you'll want to share any stats that you have or any of those email templates to kind of show some of that ROI, just like we looked at with Deloitte. Just highlighting kind of the business case. And I think what you can do is perhaps before you buy 5, 10, 15 classes, you run a sample. The vendor may be able to just run a, free sample or kind of just a preview type class. They should be able to provide you with a recorded class that you can take a look at. And so I would recommend just starting small. Of course, in a large organization, you're going to find the fan base for this right away. And then hopefully it continues to grow. Other complementary programs that you might look into that may have a little easier slide in could be things like virtual yoga classes, virtual chair yoga classes. And so by striking that balance, I think finding whatever program will help you get into the organization first and then expanding as you have the opportunity to.
And that's well said. And we've recently learned that any organization that has had to lay off or furlough employees, their retained workers, 30% of those will leave within the next 18 months. And wellness programs that are re-engaging and demonstrating that an organization cares about their wellness, those are solid statistics that HR can use to say, even if we just decrease our retained workers by 5%, I mean, depending on the size of the organization, that can result in tens of thousands of dollars more than pay for the cost of the program.
Yeah, you got it. And I do think in kind of the wide array that employers have the options of different ways to support their employees right now, this is obviously one of the most cost effective. And you're right. I do think it's just a little vote of confidence towards your perhaps remaining staff. We are here for you. We're launching these programs. We're trying new things. And that has a lot of value as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Kayla. Stay safe and healthy. And thank you everyone for joining us. You stay safe and healthy. Safe and healthy also. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Kayla.
Lisa.
Bye-bye.